Well, hello everybody. Hope you're doing great. This is Papa, and I'm back in Gilbert, Arizona, and the weather's been pretty darn nice. It's been, you can go out in a t-shirt right now if you wanted to, and I've been riding my bike every day, and I certainly enjoy doing that. We've been having a lot of fun. And Christmas is such a good time of year, and now it's New Year's, and we're sort of getting back into the swing of things. I hope you guys are all doing well. I know there's been some sickness around the family, and so we hope everybody's getting better real soon. I wanted to read you a little story. You probably heard this one in the past, but it's really a good story. It's called The Thousand Star Hotel. But I just want to say a special hi to, we can start with the Johnstons, with Isaac and Elise and Caleb and Laura and Janae. And then over in Washington, there's Lily and Levi. And up in Utah, we have Parker and Gemma and Lucy and Evie. And so I hope you all are doing so well. And of course there's Davis and Sarah and Jake. We have a lot of wonderful cousins, and I hope you love seeing each other when we have our blasts and at other times. But I'll go ahead and share this story because I think it's just a fun story. It's called The Thousand Star Hotel. Let's see here. There were once two river rats, or muskrats to be exact. Those are sort of like beavers, I guess. Muskrats who lived in a cabin near a big old river. Sheltered by a big willow tree, the cabin had cracked walls, and most of the roof had been lost in a storm. But despite the cabin's problems, Mr. and Mrs. Muskrat still called it home. Look at that cabin. Does that look like our cabin? No, we keep our cabin in pretty good shape. But this cabin has a problem. You can see the big willow tree right on top of the cabin, and then the holes in the cabin, and you can see that look at the foundations breaking on the cabin. That cabin's got some problems. But there's Mr. and Mrs. Muskrat, and they've got their fishing pole, and they're gonna go see if they can catch some fish. See what happens. Every morning after a breakfast of leftover soup, the river rats walk to the river to catch some fish. So there they are. Can you see them out on the water and the sun just coming up in the morning, and they're getting an early start, and it seems like they enjoy fishing. Mr. Muskrat always declared, "I'm sick and tired of the same old soup. Today's the day we catch enough fish to make us rich." Mrs. Muskrat would simply smile and reply, "Well, I'll be happy if we catch enough fish just for dinner. That's all we need." So now they're out on the fishing lake, and you can see Mr. and Mrs. Muskrat talking about what they're going to do, and hopefully they'll catch some fish. And Mr. Muskrat wants to get rich and catch so many fish. And each time his wife just says, "I just hope we get enough for dinner." Each evening, the river rats came home with just enough fish to cook that night, nothing more. So each night, they caught enough for dinner, and that was it. Well, let's see what happens next. One day, Mr. Muskrat felt a strong tug on his fishing line. Uh-oh, look at that. It actually pulled the boat up, and the line is going into the water. And the fishing line is pulling really hard. It's bending the rod he's holding on to. And Mrs. Muskrat is lifted clear up in the air with her little net. "Jumpin' Jiminy," he shouted. "I've never felt a fish pull like this. It must be a huge fish. I'll bet it's the biggest we've been waiting for." The biggest fish they'd ever seen and the one they'd been waiting for. Oh my gosh, look what came out of the water. A huge fish. Look at how big the boat is. And look how big the fish is. This fish is huge. Oh my gosh. After much struggling and tugging and yanking and cranking, the muskrats have managed to catch a giant golden catfish whose scales shimmered like stars. It burst out of the water and swam up to their boat, peering at the river rats through big bulging eyes. The fish spoke. "Kind and gentle river rat, show mercy, for I am a fish of great magic. And if you release me, I will grant you a wish." Oh, this is interesting. Look at how big that catfish is. And the muskrats are, they're both smiling and maybe a little bit scared. Do you think Mommy's net is going to catch that fish? Look at the little size of that net. Well, let's see what happens with the magic fish. Mr. Muskrat was too dumbfounded to speak. He couldn't even talk. "A wish?" said Mrs. Muskrat. "Let's see. Oh, a hammer and some nails to fix up our roof is all we really need." Mr. Muskrat instantly found his voice. "Hammer? Nails? You gotta be kidding. This is our chance." He looked at the fish and yelled, "We wish to live in a big fancy house with a proper roof." The fish flapped its tail once, then spake. Look what's going on. They're talking to the big catfish. Oh, and look, he's dreaming of a big home with a good roof. And his wife is just wanting a hammer and some nails. "Ripples and rushes, gush and gushes. A fish has been fished and a wish has been..." Wait just a minute, stop! Mr. Muskrat wants to change his mind. Remember, he wanted just a big, nice house with a good roof. And now he says, "I've changed my mind. Surely we can wish for something better than a plain old house." Oh my gosh. Look what he's thinking of now. He's thinking of a huge house. "Better," Mrs. Muskrat scratched her head. "Well, I don't know about that, but we could use a new soup kettle. Ours is worn out and starting to leak. But that's all we'd ever need." Mr. Muskrat frowned. He didn't want to settle for a kettle. Settle for a kettle? That sort of rhymes. Can you say settle for a kettle? Yeah. Oh my, he wanted a life of luxury. He would wish to live in the biggest and the best mansion house in the river. Again, the fish's tail flapped and it spoke. So now he's looking at that house and he said, "Yeah, I want the biggest, best house around these parts." So now the muskrat fish says, the catfish, I said that wrong. The catfish started to talk and said, "Ripples and rushes, gus and gushes. A fish has been fished and a wish has been..." Hold it just a minute, stop! Mr. Muskrat wants to stop and rethink because he thinks he can think of something bigger than the big house. "We can't waste this wish," he said. "Let's think of something even bigger than a mansion." Oh my gosh. They're thinking of a huge hotel. Look at them with their fancy clothes on and a big hotel. Oh my gosh. "Bigger," said Mrs. Muskrat. "Why don't we wish for a nice warm quilt? That's truly all we ever need, is just a real nice blanket. Wouldn't that be fun?" "You're thinking too small," said Mr. Muskrat. "A 5-star hotel is what we want. Imagine housekeeping, room service, and big fluffy pillows on a king-size bed." Mrs. Muskrat sighed. 5-star? 10-star? You could have a 1,000-star hotel and you'd still want more. Sounds like Mr. Muskrat is never satisfied. Wow. Mr. Muskrat threw his arms around his wife and exclaimed, "Jumpin' Jiminy, you're brilliant. We'll wish to live in a 1,000-star hotel." Mrs. Muskrat opened her mouth to protest, but she was interrupted by a flip of the tail and the familiar rhyme, "Ripples and rushes, gusts and gusses. A fish has been fished and a wish has been wished." And with that, the fish splashed into the river. There's the fish. It gave them their wish, and now it left. A glimmer of gold sparkled below the surface and disappeared into the light of the setting sun. Mrs. Muskrat gathered their things while Mr. Muskrat bounced ahead of his wife. "Just leave that stuff behind. Our troubled fishing days are over." So now they're running home to see what their 1,000-star motel looks like. And they're excited to get home. Heading home through the last lighted day, a strong gust of wind came from behind them. It shook the oak trees and rippled through the willows. Mrs. Muskrat looked concerned, but Mr. Muskrat had his mind on ordering dinner from his 1,000-star room service motel. The couple reached the grove at the end of the trail, but they didn't see a hotel. At the bottom of the hill, as usual, stood the Muskrat's cabin. With its cracked walls and crumbling roof, the only difference was that the old willow tree had been blown down by that strong wind. So now they can see their house for the first time. And look, it's the same old cabin, but the willow tree's been blown down. Well, what's going on here? Mr. Muskrat threw his hat to the ground. He kicked at the dirt and pulled at his hair. "That lying, cheating of a talking fish, there's no magic. This is our old cabin, as weathered and beat up and ramshackled as ever. We should have taken that fish into town and sold it." "One moment, dear. You should come and see this," Mrs. Muskrat called from inside the cabin. So there's Mr. Muskrat, and he is flaming upset. He's kicking and stomping, and he thinks that fish lied to him and just talked him out of getting caught, and that there's no magic. But then there's Mrs. Muskrat, and she's going into the house and saying, "Hey, honey, you ought to come see this. This is pretty special. Let's see what's going on." Mr. Muskrat walked inside. His wife smiled at him and pointed up through the wide hole in the roof. He tipped his head back and gasped. Without the large willow tree hanging over the cabin, he now had a perfect view of the night sky with its thousands of twinkling stars. So now they're in the cabin and they can look up. And without the roof and with that willow tree getting blown down, what can they see? Let's see. Oh my, look at that view. That is 1,000 stars. And they're both looking up at it. And look at that sky they can see. Wow. Jumpin' Jiminy, would you look at that, Mr. Muskrat marveled. They're beautiful. Mrs. Muskrat put a hand on her husband's shoulder and said, "It looks like your wish really did come true." And you know, Mr. Muskrat said, this is all we ever needed. And now they get to go to bed. And when they go to bed, they look up and see the 1,000 star hotel. That evening, the two river rats fell asleep while staring at their 1,000 star motel. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story. It's sort of a silly story about some magic with some fish and a man that wanted to get something really big and his wife that was more okay with whatever. But they ended up being able to go to sleep at night and looking at the thousands and thousands of stars. You know, up at our cabin, it gets so dark up there because there's very little light. And when there's not much light, you can really see the sky. So, when we're up there, we get some beautiful night views. And sometimes Papa goes outside when it's dark at night, and I just stand in the driveway and I look up, and it is unbelievable how many stars you can see. It is just beautiful. So, I hope you enjoyed this story of 1,000 star hotel. Well, I hope you're having a good time, and I love you, and I hope you have a great evening and a great week and in this new year. And I hope those who are sick get better real soon. And I want to say one last thing. I love you so much. Bye-bye. Have a good day. Love you.